Yep,
Cool.
we're recording. All right, class. This is our entrepreneur interview for the week. And we're really lucky to have with us Tammy Sun, who is going to tell us all about her very exciting healthcare business. But first, we're going to start with letting you guys know that, yes, Joy Sun and Tammy Sun are sisters and have had, I would say, crisscrossing career paths, kind of. I've been lucky to know both of them for a long time. So, Tammy, start with I was born in.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here, and very excited to be in your part of the world very soon. I was born in Taiwan, Taipei, Taiwan, and I'll be moving to Bentonville shortly. But I was born there. I moved here when I was a baby. My parents moved us here when I was a baby, and grew up primarily in New Jersey.
Yep. So as an undergrad, what did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
As an undergrad, I studied, and Joy did this too. We studied a lot of politics and governance and governing and international relations. I think, for me at least, I didn't really discover entrepreneurship as a career path until much, much later. And so I, really wanted to do stuff very early on in my life that was like impactful. And the thing that was most visible to me in terms of like what would make a big impact on the world was, sort of government, and policy as a platform. So I sort of gravitated towards that for the first 10 years of my life post-graduation, and then pivoted into the private sector.
So how did that happen? So first, where did you go to undergrad?
I went to NYU.
So you're living in New York City, you're interested in government and public policy. What are you doing in those years?
I really thought that I was going to go to law school. I applied to law school. I'd gotten in, and then I was walking down the street one day, and I literally ran into an old friend who I interned with at the White House. And he said, "Oh my God," I hadn't seen him in years. He said, "You should talk to some of my friends who are opening up Bill Clinton's office in Harlem, and they're looking, they're hiring a couple of people." And I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'd be happy to." And so went up, did the interview, got the job, didn't do law school. It just sort of snowballed from there. I spent a lot of time in that office working for Bill Clinton, and then went to DC and back to New York a few times, and up and down the Northeast corridor.
And where did it go sideways?
Yeah, exactly. I really sort of didn't feel like I was going to get much farther in politics and in the administration. I wasn't going to run for anything. And I wasn't going to like lead an agency, obviously. I got very curious about technology when I was working at the Federal Communications Commission. We did a lot of policy around net neutrality and broadband access and internet access, and we had started. Part of my responsibility was sort of working with a lot of the tech companies that were in Silicon Valley, and had traveled there a bunch of times, and just became really interested in sort of technology as a platform as well. Moved to Silicon Valley after my time in DC, and worked at a private tech company called Evernote.
Yeah, so probably these guys are pretty familiar with Evernote. I feel like it's a staple of modern academic work. So I feel like everybody's had some interaction with Evernote. And so how did you get from sort of entering the tech space to, so just for background for you, we're using IDEO's human-centered design field guide. So they're coming at their various business plans in a less sort of stereotypical B school kind of way and more in a human-centered design kind of way. So What problem caught your attention?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to business school, and you know, I never intended really to be an entrepreneur. I didn't aspire to be a founder. I wasn't like a founder looking for a problem. And that's a totally fine approach, by the way. If you know that like you want to be a founder of something and you're just sort of like on the hunt for a problem to solve, that works too. Um, you know, it wouldn't have worked well for me. The the very human problem that I encountered, that sort of led me here, was, you know, I was working at Evernote, as I mentioned, and I decided that I was going to freeze my eggs. And it sort of spiraled into this like experience where, as soon as I decided that I was going to do that, like every obstacle that you could imagine could came up. So like getting information about where to go was really difficult. Getting information about what the experience was like was really difficult. You know, finding a clinic was really difficult. Once I found a clinic, I had to get a second opinion on my like fertility test results, because everything was like really, really low. And so I wasn't sure who to believe. And, you know, paying for it was really, really difficult. You know, it was very expensive. And so, you know, I was very lucky. Most people don't have, you know, most Americans don't have $500 in their savings account. And so, you know, I feel very privileged and very lucky to have had, you know, money to be able to spend on this aspect of healthcare. So, uh, you know, it really dawned on me that like the fertility space was an aspect of healthcare that was outside of the healthcare system. And I was like 33, you know, a little bit older, 35 at the time. And, you know, I had been a functioning working professional for, you know, for many, many years. I paid, you know, my insurance premiums, you know, for over a decade. I paid everything that I was supposed to. And then I never had a healthcare issue. I never had a crisis. I've never taxed the system. It's never been, you know, I've never been a burden on the system. And then as soon as I felt like I needed some aspect of my healthcare to be supported, like this aspect of my healthcare was not covered. And I just really felt that that was like a grave injustice, not to me necessarily, because again, like, you know, nothing bad really happened to me. I had money, I paid for my healthcare that I needed, but I really felt it was like a massive injustice to all the other people who, you know, who probably wouldn't have access, not because they wouldn't even show up inside a clinic, right? Like, you wouldn't even show up inside a fertility clinic if you knew that you couldn't afford a $10,000 treatment. Like, there are people who just like never even present, never even show up, who actually need that type of care. And so I didn't really know what the solution was. I knew nothing about selling to employers. I knew nothing about building software. I knew nothing about, you know, building and managing, recruiting, you know, hyper growth teams. I spent almost a year just like obsessively thinking about the problem and like looking at the problem from all sorts of different angles before we even landed on a solution. And we tried all sorts of solutions before we landed on this one.
And so what is it? So talk us through you know, they're just working on pitches. So talk us through the elevator pitch.
Yeah, so we help we make it easier for employers to give employees money to pay for things like IVF, egg freezing, adoption, and surrogacy. Like, it's that simple. So if you work at a company that has Carrot, you have some number of dollars. It can range from $5,000 to $150,000. Sort of, we help companies design that plan. But if you have Carrot at your company, you have financial coverage to pay for fertility care, fertility treatments, and you have a care team that will support you along the way. So you can text and video and voice chat through our app with a care team of fertility nurses, doctors, adoption lawyers, and others.
And so in the sort of problem solving aspect of coming up with a variety of solutions, what helped you land on that being the route to address the problem?
Well, it's a good question because I really thought I was going to start a consumer company. I mean, I went through the experience. My co-founder is a fertility doctor, and so we really were convinced that we would do something to help the patients. And we looked at all sorts of things. We looked at an app to help you find an egg freezing doctor. We looked at things to send at home testing on like biomarkers. We looked at, what else did we look at? We looked at like easier ways to do loans and financing to help pay for treatments. And ultimately, the reason that we landed on this solution, which is selling a product to employers, is because in this country, and this isn't true for every country around the world, but in this country, it is fundamentally true today and for the very near and probably medium, I would say long term, employers provide healthcare. If you want healthcare in this country, employers provide more than half of it. The other half is like largely Medicare and Medicaid combined. Employers provide healthcare for more than 150 million Americans, whether you're a small company, fully insured, or a large company, which means you're self-funded. And so, what we discovered was that if you want to make fertility treatments and fertility healthcare a standard part of healthcare, then you have to get the employers to agree to that. You have to get them to buy into that thesis that this is a fundamental part of healthcare because they're the ones that are providing it.
Yeah.
And so, there is another platform that could provide it at scale, which is government, and you can imagine all sorts of like legislations and policies that could give everybody access to fertility treatments and IVF. But the chances of that we discerned were markedly lower than partnering with companies. So that's what we do is we partner with companies in order to get to the member, who we call the members, but really to get to the employee, the person, the human, the consumer, so that they have financial coverage for the treatments that they want. Like ultimately, when we started going through all the different consumer-driven ideas, like as a person, if you put the person at the center of it, like getting access to more debt and more loans is not really like that game-changing, right? Like you don't really want to just pile on massive amounts of medical debt on top of everything else. Medical debt is actually the number one reason that Americans file for bankruptcy.
Yep.
And so building a scalable way to give people easy access to medical debt didn't seem that appealing. So medical debt is it's still expensive. Like you could make it easy for people to get information about fertility treatments, but like, what's the point? Because they're going to get the information about it and they're going to think that this is important and they're going to want to access the healthcare, but then they can't afford it, right? Yeah. Like, what's the point? So really like the crux of the problem around access is affordability. Yeah. And that's why we're going through payers, essentially, health plans and employers.
And what's your day-to-day role?
Well, it's very different now than it was, a couple of years ago. My day-to-day role now is just very much like an orchestrator of people. So, we have a fairly large team now. We have lots of, really smart people, lots of managers. And so my job is primarily focused on making sure that the company understands what our most important goals are, that everyone's rowing in the same direction, but that we have the right people in the right jobs, in the right roles that speak to their strengths and also speak to the needs of the business. So it's largely like has turned into sort of a people puzzle job, whereas in the beginning it was definitely much more of a product. Yeah. And a marketing and sales sort of role. When you're really trying to like find that product market fit, it was much different.
Sure. What's been the biggest surprise starting something on your own?
I think the biggest surprise is that it doesn't get easier. Like when you're small, you want to be big and you think it'll be easier when you're bigger, and then when you're bigger, you think it'll be easier when you're just like a little bit bigger than you are. And like what you learn is that like it doesn't actually get easier, and that there are like wonderful aspects of being small, and that there are things that you should really enjoy about, you know, whatever present stage that you're in. Every stage of growth, if you're lucky enough to have it, has like enormous challenges, and a lot of those complexities get you know, even bigger and more complicated as the business grows. And so you know, looking back, I remember being like so worried about growth and the like whether we were going to hit milestones. You know, we did, but there were so many good things about being a team of 10 that just like don't exist when you're a team of 100. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think that's, I mean, I certainly found that to be the case for myself also, is like, wow, you know, every new person comes with sort of exponential levels of complexity, and it's not just additive. It's not just another person. It's another person and all of their stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's one more person in the web that has to be aligned, that you have to communicate with, you have to make sure that they're, you know, that they're on the same page. And so it just, you know, there's a lot of agility and a lot of fun in having the entire company in the same room that I miss, because you could just like turn around and say something to the whole company, and then alignment is easy because everyone hears you. That you know, it's just not possible anymore. So I think, you know, particularly in the early stages, which I imagine some people who are watching this might be in early stages of like thinking about an idea, or like thinking about what they may want to do either during college or after college, like, you know, there is a like there's just something really nice about being in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the untapped potential is so much more fun than once the potential's been tapped and you're like, now what?
Yeah. Well, you sort of feel like in the early days, if you really are onto something, like you definitely have a feeling of untapped, like that, you know, a secret about the world that nobody else knows, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, once you're successful, everyone knows your secret and everyone believes you. But in the early days, like it's kind of fun.
Yeah, for sure. So what is next? So for you, do you see yourself sort of staying in this people role for the foreseeable future, or what's your sort of personal game plan?
Well, we're moving to Arkansas. So that's in the next immediate future. I mean, I think, you know, yeah, ultimately, I think the CEO role ultimately evolves towards being, you know, your job is like, in the early days, your job is to build the product, and to find the market to sell it to. And then like over time, your product becomes your company,
Yeah.
right? So your job is to sort of build the company, and bring in people who have capabilities rather than you always doing it yourself.
Yeah.
So it is very much like at scale permanently a vision, alignment, and then sort of people job. And that's probably what it'll be for a long time.
Yeah. Well, what would you tell a whole bunch of, you know, 20-year-old kids in the middle of a pandemic who are trying to figure out what to be and what to do?
I mean, the pandemic is, it's, you know, try to find the opportunity in the pain, right? There's a lot of people who are feeling a lot of pain right now, and I think that the world has in many ways been turned upside down, but periods of like massive disruption like this have also given birth to like a lot of great companies. And you know, it can be a time of massive ingenuity and creativity, because nothing normal is necessarily true anymore, right? You have so much more freedom to experiment and color outside the lines where you may not have had that before. And so I would really encourage folks who are younger to like think about it like that, and think about like where are people suffering the most, where is like pain the highest, and see if you can like find a solution to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really it for our class chat today. Thank you so much for being willing to do it. These guys need all the inspiration they can get to go off and do all the things that our crowd didn't think of. And we're lucky that you're coming to hang out with us. And so maybe in the next version of this class, we can do it in person.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and definitely I hope this was somewhat helpful. And yeah, let me know how I can help.